Good morning, everyone. People are going to be joining in, but we're going to get started so that we're respecting everybody's time. So thank you all for joining us for tracking the Great Lakes region's progress through Blue Accounting. I'm Jess Leinhart. I'm the director of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Legislative Caucus. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few points. So this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on our website in the coming days. All lines are going to be muted during the presentation. And while we will be spotlighting our speakers during the presentation, there will be an opportunity to turn on your videos at the end during the Q&A portion. Our speakers have graciously agreed to take questions during their presentation in the chat. So if something comes up while they're going over their materials, you can type your question right into the chat and it should be referenced and answered. We will also be taking questions after the presentation, and you may ask your question by raising your hand, and then you will be recognized to turn on your video and go ahead and ask. And just to be clear, we will not be answering any raised hands during the presentation, so those will only be in the chat. And so to get us started, I am going to pass the mic over to the GLLC chair, Wisconsin Senator Andre Jacques. Over to you, Senator.
Thank you, Jess. Well, good morning, everyone, especially to any new legislators or staff that might be joining us, and welcome to our first Great Lakes St. Lawrence Legislative Caucus webinar of the year. It is truly a tremendous honor to work with all of you on these Great Lakes basin-wide environmental initiatives. And to that end, here at the caucus, we've enjoyed our strong working relationship with the Great Lakes Commission and are very eager to hear the latest on Blue Accounting and how we can document the impact of our investments and efforts and what we can learn from each other. But first, I'd like to share a quick bit about the caucus. The Great Lakes, their GLLC, brings together legislators from all 10 Great Lakes states and provinces to study, share, and develop policy to address Great Lakes environmental issues. The caucus provides an essential binational, nonpartisan forum for legislators to build relationships and learn from each other to promote regional collaboration and the complex challenges we all face. With that in mind, I would like to invite my colleagues in the various state and provincial legislatures to join our effort as members if you haven't already. It is free and simple to join the GLLC on our website or by reaching out to Jess. Once you are a member, you will be eligible to apply to be a 2023 Burkholz Institute Fellow and participate in our in-depth policy workshop on coastal and climate resiliency in Great Lakes communities. As a 2019 Burkholz Institute Fellow, I'm extremely grateful for that opportunity and the continuing opportunity to work with my regional colleagues on nutrient management. Lastly, please keep in mind that our annual meeting will be in Quebec City this fall on September 8th and 9th, and we'd love to see you all there. I'd also really like to thank the GLLC sponsors, the Joyce Foundation, the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation, and the Fred A. and Barbara M. Erb Family Foundation. We greatly appreciate the support we continue to receive from these three foundations and their recognition that state and provincial legislators are vital stakeholders to engage in the policymaking process in the Great Lakes region. Our legislative tracker will be starting up now that we're all back in session. So again, thank you for joining us today. And I'll pass things back over to Jess to introduce our featured speakers for today.
Thank you so much, Senator Jacques. So we have two speakers joining us today from the Great Lakes Commission, Nicole Zacharda and Ceci Weibert. Nicole joined the commission staff in 2016 after a lengthy career in state government. She leads the GLC's water quality and infrastructure team and coordinates the Blue Accounting initiative. Ceci is the project manager for the GLC's aquatic invasive species program. In this role, she serves as the coordinator of the Great Lakes, a panel on aquatic nuisance species, as well as the lead on the Blue Accounting AIS issue. She also manages a variety of interjurisdictional invasive species projects. So over to you, Nicole.
Good morning. Thanks for the introduction, Jess, and thank you to Senator Jacques for having us again to talk with legislators about blue accounting. I think I've briefed you a couple times now, and I'm going to pull up some slides while we get talking today. So Senator Jacques has been a longstanding advocate for our blue accounting initiative. So I'd like to just take a moment to appreciate that. He saw the potential for what we've been trying to do for some time now. And I hope as we share an update with all of you today that a number of you also can see the potential of blue accounting. So I think I am advancing my slides. If I'm not, Jess will let me know. Today, we're going to cover an introduction, not only of blue accounting, but also a bit on the Great Lakes Commission. We chuckle sometimes that we are the GLC and you all are the GLLC, and over the years have found some really wonderful opportunities to collaborate together. So after we introduce our programs and who we are, we're going to go over 3 issues that are currently presented in blue accounting. You'll learn that issues are how we organize information within blue accounting. And at the moment, we will be talking about our newest issue that was launched in December. Content went live. That's on drinking water. Ceci will speak about our aquatic invasive species issue, and then we'll come back to me and I will talk about an issue near and dear to the hearts of the caucus's nutrient management task force, and that is Lake Erie algae. We'll talk a little bit about what's next for blue accounting in the months and years to come, and then we'll hopefully definitely have time for some questions. I do also want to take a moment to acknowledge that the funders of the Legislative Caucus that were up on Jess's slide are also significant investors in blue accounting. In particular, the Joyce Foundation provided the support for us to move our drinking water issue forward, and we are very grateful for that. So what is the Great Lakes Commission? We are actually a very small public agency that has been in existence since 1955, when the Great Lakes Basin Compact was initially put together. Those thinkers decades ago were already thinking on a watershed-based basis, and you can see the very large watershed of the Great Lakes Basin on the map that's on your screen, and I think that same map is actually over my shoulder. In 1968, Congress said okay to the states working together. So each of you in your states have unique legislation that identifies who actually serves on the Great Lakes Commission, and we'll talk about that a little bit this morning as well. We also work with the provinces. Ontario and Quebec joined as associate members in 1999. And we really try very hard through the Commission's efforts to make sure that our very, very large Great Lakes Basin and large lakes are tended in similar and consistent ways so that we can work together trying to address some of those wicked problems of the Great Lakes that many of you care so much about that brought you into the caucus's work. So commissioners, we generally have 3 to 5 from each state or province. One person from each jurisdiction serves as the head of delegation and is on the GLC's board of directors, which meets monthly. The GLC is currently chaired by Todd Ames of Wisconsin. He's in the second of a 2-year term. The commission meets as a body generally twice a year. On occasion, there might be some special meetings called, but we have an annual and both a semi-annual meeting. The next meeting will be the semi-annual meeting. I'm getting my tongue tied this morning in Chicago this May. We also have staff. I'm staff. Ceci is staff. And we report to our executive director, Erica Jensen. We're a fairly small group based here in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And do come into the office. I'm in the office today. Ceci is working from home. So we're still in that flexible work schedule. And with that, I'm going to move along to what blue accounting is. So blue accounting has been in existence for, I think, a decade now, after an initial call years ago from the then governors and premiers of the Great Lakes region, looking for a better way to share information on how we're doing with issues that are of great importance to the Great Lakes. So I saw the potential of what blue accounting could be and was wooed away from a job in state government to join the Great Lakes Commission in 2016. Since then, we've piloted and then refreshed a number of issues in blue accounting, learning all along. And one of the key takeaways that we've had over that time period is to really refine who we're building this for. And that's you guys. Our audience is really elected and high-level appointed officials. So that would also include Great Lakes commissioners. Our scope includes primarily environmental data at this point in time, but we are very eager to, over the years, start adding more socioeconomic data around the Great Lakes, because we know that is something of key importance to all of us, is having all three of those aspects portrayed. I've got an asterisk on the scope because one thing that we are very mindful of as the staff of the Great Lakes Commission is that we move in accordance with a strategic plan that is set by our commissioners. We are at the moment getting very close to having a new strategic plan, and that will provide us with some guidance for the next 5-year period. The scale, we've talked a little bit, you all know that the Great Lakes Basin is enormous. I think a common statistic I've heard is that if the Great Lakes were a nation, we would have the 3rd largest GDP in all the world. So we are big, and there's a lot of power and impact in having this amount of water that we steward. So we're presenting information at a lake basin scale. At this point, we only have information, detailed information on Lake Erie up, and I'll show you a bit of that when we move over to the website. But very important, and coming directly from feedback that we received from Great Lakes St. Lawrence Legislative Caucus members, is the jurisdiction scale. We know that you work within your state or province and are working very hard to make sure the information is accessible to you within that footprint where you have influence in making policy. So with that, I am going to get out of this slide deck and go to the site and dismiss my reminders here. I'm just going to take a moment to close. Nope, I'm not going to do that. I'll make a mess. This is the Blue Accounting website. So hopefully some of you have encountered it before. If not, Jess is going to drop the link into a chat, or it's easy enough to just type in blueaccounting.org if you'd like to follow along on your computer or device. I will tell you that we are primarily building information products to be viewed on a computer screen. So you'll want to make sure that if you want to really dive into the details on blue accounting, you'll be on a laptop or a desktop computer. So this is our homepage. Throughout the site, clicking blue accounting, or our Rubik's Cube of problems we're trying to solve, will take you back to this homepage. We're presenting information in 3 ways you can see across the top. Exploring by issue, that's what we're really going to talk about today. Using the map, I'll quickly show you that. And then we also have the opportunity for people that want to really dig into the data to use our data portal. So I think what I'll start with is showing us Ohio's page. I'm not sure, I didn't look at the participant list as you all were joining, but hopefully we have someone on from Ohio. And what you see when you come to these pages are a list of goals. Blue accounting really moves by having common shared goals for what we're trying to achieve around the Great Lakes Basin. And so each of our issues will have 1 or more goals that they're working toward, with a work group of people that have expertise on that issue that we assemble through the help of our commissioners, through the help of some of you, to be able to create the work groups that not only help look at goals, whether they're in existence or need to be determined, but also how you would measure progress toward those goals. And so when you click a plus sign for any of these goals on your jurisdiction's progress page, it opens up and you can start to see what exactly are we tracking. And these gauges, the stoplight gauge is something that is deployed a little bit on the site, not that much, but hopefully enough that you can see what we're looking forward to doing. We are only using this gauge when there's a clearly defined target for the metric that we're looking at. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that when we jump into the Lake Erie issue. So I think at this point, let's jump into the drinking water issue. So we'll go back to this homepage. And you can click the box or simply scroll down to see our issues. 3 of these already have detailed information up, and those are the ones we'll talk about today. So drinking water will open up this page. Now, we've been calling these our landing pages for an issue where you can come in and see all of the goals that we're looking at. And you can also get a little bit more information on what it is we're doing, what we're measuring. We also, through the About page on the site, have more information on which agencies, nonprofit entities, and private sector colleagues are working with us on these work groups that really are the driving force of Blue Accounting and the information we present. So drinking water is a big issue, of course, in the Great Lakes. And so we've had a lot of people working with us. 3 of these 4 goals that you see on your screen now have metrics attached to them. So again, by clicking the plus sign, we open up and can see for each of these the metric that the team is working on. Now, the 4th goal, where we have not been able to put up a metric yet, is this tricky one, ensuring access to water. We're going to continue having discussions toward what best can fit within this space. And I would encourage all of you, as you're maybe looking at the site or having your staff look at the site, to think about what would be useful to you there as you're doing your good work. And please provide us with some feedback. That's what we're working on in this moment. So what I want to focus on this morning, while I have a bit of time, is to show you what we have up on the site related to water distribution. And of course, you really cannot talk about water distribution in this moment in time, in this country in particular, without thinking about lead. And so what our metric details is where the jurisdictions are at with respect to reducing lead from distribution systems. So by clicking this metric, we open up a metric page that will be consistent across all of our Blue Accounting issues. This was something that was really important to us as we have evolved the website over the years, and that's to make sure that whether you're in the drinking water issue with me, or you're looking at Ceci's group's material and the aquatic invasive species, the look and feel is the same. So you're going to see an overview tab that explains for each of the metrics on Blue Accounting, what are we tracking and why is it so important? There'll be an Explore tab that's a data product that you can really drive around and filter information to get exactly what you want. Most of those products have their own internal download function if you want to be able to pull information away from that work, or you can of course always take a screenshot, but we do like to see it sourced to Blue Accounting. The compare piece is where through a couple of different mechanisms, we're really trying to look at whether on an ecosystem basis, which is something I'll show you with the Lake Erie algae, or from a policy standpoint, how are we doing when we look across some of the jurisdictions or spaces in the Great Lakes? And so that's one piece that I am really delighted to share with you today, because we've been able to pull in some work from the Legislative Caucus with this piece. But first, the Explore tab. I'm a very linear thinker, and so I always go through these tabs in the same way. We start with our overview, we go to Explore, and then we compare. The fun thing with a lot of these data products is that you can pull them open full screen. So I'll do that right now so that it's a little bit bigger for you all to take a look. And what we did with this product, and I think James Polidori on our team is actually on with us today, and he did a lot of this work with our talented geographic information system staff. We have a map where we've tried to use this legend to share what is going on with each of the states. We have not yet had a chance to engage with the provinces on this. What's happening with the states with respect to lead inventories. And a number of you are probably aware that there is a federal rule in the US under the Safe Drinking Water Act that has now established a new deadline in October of 2024, when all of the drinking water utilities within a state need to be able to report in to the state agency that they have inventoried or identified where lead service lines exist within their utility service area, and move forward from that, have to have some plans to replace them. So you can see we have kind of a mixed bag of everybody's got their own sort of status within the Great Lakes Basin in terms of lead amongst the states. Wisconsin has a public service commission that actually deals with water utilities. And so we see them having a lot of information already available. When you click any of these states that you're interested in, you get a more detailed box opening up that gives you a little bit more information, but importantly, we have included a link through the help of our work group to have you go directly into the state agency page that has more specific information on this. So hopefully that is helpful. We know sometimes you dive into some of these bigger agency web pages and sometimes it's hard to get exactly what you want. A number of our data products also have a share function on them, where if you have this arrow clicked, you can copy a link and share out on social media. Unfortunately, you can't share it with the specific state, but you would be able to share the mapping product. Our back arrow here will take us back to the metrics page where we were. And now we'll jump over to the compare piece, and that's going to take a moment to load. So we'll just come over here. One of the things that I'm most excited about with Blue Accounting in this moment is that we've really shifted from trying to be a big data machine, because the truth is data around the Great Lakes has some room to grow in terms of consistency and availability of data. But what we found over this past decade of working on Blue Accounting is we can really share a lot of information on policies where we see consistency amongst the states. So looking at this first row here on your screen with reporting, exceedances of the action level for lead in drinking water need to be reported to consumers. Everyone's doing great with that. But as we move down this list of key program components that work group members identified, you can start to see that we're not always so consistent. What I'm excited about with this piece, and you may have noticed it already, but I'll highlight it, is the caucus previously had, before the Burkholz Institute became as formal as it is now, had a previous policy institute focused on lead in drinking water, and some great policy recommendations came out of that. And so with the program components, if you note an asterisk, that actually is coming from that document from 2020, and we've got that also available on the site. Something that's been very recently added to the site, we have a download button, so you can click and create a printer-friendly PDF of these documents. The one thing that I'd still like us to keep working on is that we can't really pull in that Explorer page because it's so dynamic. So when you download a page, you're getting the overview, the what are we tracking, why does it matter, and then move over into this table that will be available for you. We also have a click either through any of these dots or your state heading in the table that will open up a state-specific view, again, looking at all of these program components, but providing more detail. And again, hopefully being very helpful in providing some links that go directly into state or provincial agency pages where you can dig deeper, you or your staff, when you're looking into the potential to maybe introduce legislation to say, hey, we've got an open circle there and it'd be nice if we could fill it in or get halfway there. We are adding the download feature to these. We just haven't quite got there yet, but it will hopefully by the end of March. I've been working with our graphic designer on this. You'll be able to download your specific pages when we use these tables across Blue Accounting. I also want to take a moment while we're here, and I think I have about a minute to go before I hand it to Ceci, to come up and show you our resources. So we have a data portal where you can access all of the data that drives the Explore tab. So when we have these data dashboards and complex data pieces, it's all available through the portal, along with some older Blue Accounting issue work that's not at this point maintained on the main site. We also have a library, and I've only got one drinking water item in here for you so far, but we're going to be doing some work on this. So throughout Blue Accounting, we have information that underpins the content on the site, and we're making sure that we have that readily available here as well. So if you come in and want to filter for drinking water and filter for model policies, then we can click submit, and your legislative caucus policy should come up. It's just a little slow today. So you can open this up and go directly into a PDF from the GLLC website for that work. So that's our drinking water issue. There's a lot of information in here, so I encourage you to poke around and take a look. But right now, I'm going to hand things over to Ceci to share with you what's happening with the AIS issue.
Thanks, Nicole. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen here. And thanks to Nicole for that super awesome overview. And thank you to Jess for the introduction. So as a refresher, I'm Ceci from our Aquatic Invasive Species program here at the Great Lakes Commission. So Nicole gave a really awesome overview of the site and sort of the structure and how all of the pieces fit together. So I'm just going to dive right into some of the aquatic invasive species work that I think is going to be most relevant for you all. So here on our landing page, I do want to go over what our shared goals are. They're very straightforward. We want to prevent the introduction of new AIS. If we are unsuccessful in prevention, then we want to make sure we're detecting and responding to any new introductions before they become an issue. And then in the case of longstanding species or populations that have been present in the Great Lakes for many, many years, we want to make sure that we're, controlling those populations to reduce negative impacts. And so I think today, what is going to be the best to cover in the time that I have is some of our metrics here in our prevention goals. So we have 2 metrics right now. We're working on 2 more, but the 2 that I'm going to share today are about recreational boating and harmonization of species regulations. So I am going to click through some tabs here. I got everything pulled up ahead of time to make sure that the loading times weren't going to be an issue. So I am, like Nicole, going to pull us into our full screen map here. And so with our recreational boating dashboard here, what we really wanted to communicate and develop was a tool that was going to be beneficial to both natural resource managers and regulators and policymakers like yourself. So how we've done that is that we have developed a series of what we're calling prevention program components, similar to like what Nicole just showed with those tables for safe drinking water. And here under our layers, we have a series of different categories. So, agency capacity, partnerships, outreach, reporting and evaluation, and inspection and decontamination. Those are our primary sort of different avenues in which a prevention program can have some success. And one thing that we did very intentionally here, and then I'm going to show some tables that support this data to really key in on this point here, but for our 5 primary categories here, we combined regulatory aspects that folks like yourself would be a little bit more interested in with some of the non-regulatory voluntary aspects that management staff are going to be involved in. For our map here, we did put in a regulatory only table as well. So you can see here sort of what the status is, the playing field of those regulatory components. Now, if you want to know what these components are, sort of how you compare, we've put together a series of tables similar to what Nicole just showed for each of our jurisdictions, and it comes to recreational boating. I'm going to click on inspection and decontamination or pull it up here because this is one that has the most the biggest mix of regulatory and non-regulatory components. So just like what Nicole showed, we have our comparison table here with our open and closed circles. And like I said, there's a inclusion here of both regulatory aspects and these non-italicized sort of voluntary aspects. And what I really want to talk about with this metric is, not just the potential of what this can be, but actually what it has done in the region. And so if we have any representatives from Ontario on the call today, I really want to shout out and call those folks out because Ontario recently, I believe it was last year, passed an update to their recreational boating legislation. And during the development of that policy update, staff from the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry actually referenced this database of data and comparison of programs across the region to sort of see, as Nicole pointed out, okay, we've got some open circles here. if we've got an open circle for implementation of inspections, let's look at Michigan, Minnesota, New York, or Quebec to see what they're doing and how they approach their program. And just like Nicole's showed us, that we also have these jurisdictional specific tables that outline, for program components, whether they are implemented, are not implemented, and how, some details about what that looks like. And that really provided OMNRF with an opportunity to, colloquially, I'll say, work smarter, not harder, and really be able to pull from work that other surrounding jurisdictions have done and have been successful with, and then also to establish a level of consistency in terms of how programs are carried out. And then that just provides more consistency, both in terms of how regulations are written and enforced, but also for boaters, or for folks who might be using these boat launches. They know what to expect, whether they're in Quebec or Ontario or Minnesota. The second one that I'll show here that I think might have a little bit more interest for you all is this harmonization of species regulations. So for this metric, we pulled together the list of 21 least wanted aquatic invasive species from the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Governors and Premiers AIS Task Force, and then also species that are regulated at a federal level within the United States and within Canada. And so again, we have a map that's just showing, sort of across the board as of 2021. We need to update this with 2022 information. But what does this look like in terms of, again, that consistency and that harmonization effort? And really where we get into the data here is these really data-rich tables. It's really small here because I'm just on my laptop. But what we've done is on a basis of species, jurisdictions, and specific regulated activities. So that being like, is a species prohibited from sale? Is a species, prohibited from being carried across, possession? Are you allowed to own it but not sell it? We've laid out all of the data for those species that are on the least wanted list and the federal regulated species list, so that individual states and provinces can sort of identify where are the areas of opportunity for harmonization, and where does it make sense to sort of build on some of the programs that we're already implementing. So there's a lot of really good data in here. I wish it was a little bit bigger, so maybe I should have come into the office, but yeah, I think that's the quick and dirty overview of aquatic invasive species. So I'm really excited about the really good work we've been doing here, and I'm happy to answer any questions or have a conversation about any of this.
Thanks, Ceci. I think we are coming back to me now, so I'll now reshare my screen, and hopefully we are back, and it's not a problem, Ceci, that you didn't come in, because I'll share with everyone that the richness of that data product that Ceci just shared is really something that you need to be able to look at yourselves or have your staff look at and scrutinize. And our team, myself, Ceci, anyone that's working here with us on Blue Accounting are happy to be available to you or your staff when you have a moment to dig in, and maybe you'll see that you have some questions. So next we're going to talk about our Lake Erie algae issue. And so I want to just take a moment to share that we clicked explore by issue before and basically jumped down this page. You can also get into issues through this top line navigation, and this also will navigate the same way that you would if you were clicking through the map. So for now, we're going to go into this Lake Erie algae issue and take a look at what a work group that has primarily, I should say entirely, been made up of members of a group that's called the Annex 4 Subcommittee. And the Annex 4 Subcommittee was created under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, the agreement between the US and Canada that really sets another stage for how we look at working together to protect the Great Lakes. And one of the changes that came out of the update of that agreement in 2012 was to create an annex that's really focused on nutrient reduction. So similar to the caucus's task force on nutrient management, there is a binational agency task force, federal, state, and provincial, that has been looking at nutrient reduction, starting with Lake Erie, because I think everyone is aware that Lake Erie has a harmful algal bloom problem. And while we're seeing harmful algal blooms pop up elsewhere around the Great Lakes, some in places we'd expect, and others places we wouldn't expect, like Lake Superior, Lake Erie is certainly the one where we know that the blooms are largest. They have shown themselves to be toxic. Those of you that remember when we've had some affected drinking water supplies, including the city of Toledo and other areas in 2014, the focus on starting with Lake Erie makes a lot of sense. So we started with Lake Erie as well when we were thinking about nutrients in blue accounting, and have been working with those subcommittee members to make sure that we really stay in step in the information we're presenting here on blue accounting with their efforts under the water quality agreement. You may be aware that through that water quality agreement, a 40% reduction goal was established in 2016. That is a 40% reduction from 2008 levels of phosphorus that were flowing through tributaries to the western basin of Lake Erie, but also to the western and central basins themselves. The eastern basin of Lake Erie has a little bit different problem for those of you that are in Pennsylvania or New York, in that the eastern basin sees an issue with cladophora, which is what you might think of as beach muck when it washes up. It's a benthic true algae, whereas the harmful algal blooms are actually coming from a cyanobacteria. That's your science moment for this morning. So harmful algal blooms are what we're really concerned about, but what drives the harmful algal blooms? At this point, we're aware that phosphorus is one of those key drivers. It's not the only one, but it's the one that the annex has chosen right now to really be focused on. So we'll start with the first of the 4 metrics that are being tracked for that one goal of a 40% reduction of phosphorus to the lake. Our harmful algal blooms metric, again, looks like those metric pages that we've taken a look at this morning through Drinking Water and AIS. What we track, why it matters. I think a lot of us certainly know why it matters with harmful algal blooms. We share information, and this is true throughout the site, where if you take a moment, we have a little bit of text. We tried hard not to give you too much text, but there are explainers throughout the site. So before we dig in on some of the data products, you can take a quick read. And what we're looking at for harmful algal bloom severity is actually an index that was created by the scientists at NOAA. And so that's what's on this Explore page. Again, a little bit more explanation here as to what we're looking for in terms of severity. And so we've got the line of what we're aiming for, 2.9 as our target. And then you can see year by year through this assessment process of algal bloom biomass, how big was it, how well we're doing, and that we've definitely not, unfortunately, we've not done as well as you would have hoped with the amount of effort that's going into Lake Erie. So the other thing I want to share with you on this piece is this phosphorus in spring metric. And so we can, through this metrics sidebar here, see all of the metrics that are related to this goal. So that's a feature on the site that we hope to grow. Related metrics, nothing's tied here yet, but I do hope in the future that we have some of our drinking water metrics clearly relate to harmful algal blooms and can tie in here. We also have a link to our Great Lakes Habs Collaborative down here, more information where partners can share what's going on with their specific resources that relate to the goal that we're looking at. So if we look at phosphorus in spring, the big driver, so if phosphorus is the driver to start with, the driving force behind that is the Maumee River that flows through Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana, parts of it. And what happens in spring, with spring being defined, here you can see on the site, March 1st through July 31st. So not maybe the way most of us think about spring, but from a water quality standpoint and what's being tracked, that's spring. And so we again similar layout for this metric related to the 40% reduction goal. You can explore what's happening watershed by watershed. So we start with the Maumee because again, that is the driving force within that larger driver, with phosphorus being an issue in the lake. And what you have here is the map, so you can see where you are within the Western Lake Erie Basin. The Maumee River is what we start with as a highlight, so it is outlined in black. You can also see where the final monitoring locations are. What the scientists that are working on this are trying to do is make sure that they're capturing the flow through these tributary rivers before it starts to mix with the lake, right? We don't want to see dilution, but what's actually coming through the river. And again, be able to look at a target. In this case, for spring total phosphorus, we're looking for the number of 860 metric tons, and that has been met, but not as frequently as we would like it to be met. With these total phosphorus load charts that you'll see within the site, the sort of turquoise line that you have at the top is discharge. So we also want to be able to see that correlation between high load and high flow is something that's happening around the lake. So when we know we have a very, very wet spring, then we can anticipate that that might be a bad year for the bloom on the lake. There's a lot of fun features within this particular data product that we use for Lake Erie algae. The charts are downloadable, and so you can choose how you want them downloaded, so you can pull them into different briefings and papers. We can also, for spring, select between total phosphorus and soluble or dissolved reactive phosphorus, which is again another driver within a driver piece of the type of phosphorus that is particularly available for the cyanobacteria that make up those algal blooms to access. So that's our very quick run through of the Lake Erie algae issue. I think I do have moments to jump back over into my slide deck. So I'm going to do that now and give you just a quick overview of what's happening. So this has been a really great moment. And again, thanks to Senator Jacques and to Jess for having us in, because with the launch of the drinking water issue, we now have 3 issues with a lot of content up on Blue Accounting, and we really want to know how we're doing. And since legislators around the Great Lakes Basin are really one of our primary audiences, we'd like to hear back from you, from your staff, thinking about the site in 2 primary ways. We want to know about content. Are there things that are on the site that you'd like to know more about? Are we missing some things that would be of particular impact to you as you're thinking about potential legislation to introduce in your states? So think about content. What's not here that you'd like to see there? Or is there something that we've got up that with a little bit more detail could increase its impact? The other piece that we want to think about is we're building this information platform. It's really just a very complex website, is function. We've added that download button that I've shared. We've got to deploy it further so that it's available across the entire site. That's one thing that we, through some conversations, understood would be helpful. If there's other website functionality that you find challenging or we could improve, we really want to hear about that as well. We are planning, hopefully, Jess and I have hatched a little bit of a plan with the Burkholz Institute coming up in Detroit to be able to set aside some space for myself and hopefully a third-party firm to help us do some evaluation. And so if you do join the Burkholz Institute, if we would potentially be able to sit down and get some direct feedback and go through the site and see what you're thinking there. But we'll make sure that my email is available to everyone so that if you outside of that want to get involved and potentially sit for an interview or be part of a focus group, we'd be very happy to get that feedback from you. By the end of this year, we're looking to reestablish 2 groups that previously had piloted information on Blue Accounting. The Great Lakes Commission has been very, very focused on climate resiliency. and I just misspoke, climate resiliency is a brand new issue. What recently came out is an action plan on climate resiliency that Great Lakes commissioners and partners have been working on for quite some time. And it references blue accounting in a number of places, which was my cue that it was time for me to get involved. And so we're looking forward to launch that issue and bring back our maritime transportation issue that was the one pilot issue a few years ago that really did get into those economic scoped metrics. And so we're excited to have that come back because maritime transportation is so important for the Great Lakes region. And of course, beyond, we're really hoping that what we're building here is helpful to all of you. And so I am looking forward to handing things back to Jess, and I can stop my share now and be available to answer any questions that you might have. And Ceci's here as well if you have specific AIS questions.
Well, wonderful. Thank you both, Nicole and Ceci, for that excellent presentation. I cannot overstate what an asset Blue Accounting is and the Great Lakes Commission is for those of us who work in this space. We are very lucky to have you both, as well as your teams, working on this and helping share those resources so openly. So now it is the portion of the meeting where you are welcome to turn on your video and raise your hand if you have a question. If you would like to raise your hand, you just go to the bottom bar of the Zoom window where it says reactions, and there is that raise your hand option there. And also, if you while you're thinking of your questions, I'll reiterate Nicole's ask that you could also raise your hand to share if there is something that you want to give or feedback you want to give to Ceci or Nicole, or to tell us how you would plan to use this information moving forward. So that ask is out there. And while we are waiting for those hands to pop up, I'll ask a question that came in. So this one was specific to the drinking water work. So for Nicole, so when we have the Erie stat, it's showing data over time. Are there plans? I know that drinking water just launched, but are there plans to show some data over time in drinking water? And maybe you can talk more about what might be available there.
Yes, so that is a great question. There's certainly so much that we could put up. I'd encourage those of you that are interested in that to go into the goal related to water treatment. We've been able to pull from federal databases information on compliance rates and where we're seeing potentially some issues around the Great Lakes. I'm sure everyone is tuned into PFAS as a very, very challenging issue that we're dealing with here in our region and across both nations, really. And so we have some information up on that. The Explore dashboard is a very rich piece under, again, that treatment goal for drinking water. And then what we've also done with our work group is identify some primary contaminants of concern in the Great Lakes. And of course, PFAS and harmful algal blooms are two of them. But we also have a few other ones that are included, and there's some write-ups that explain where those contaminants are coming from and sharing prevalence and how much we're seeing of it around the Great Lakes. So hopefully that's helpful as well.
Yeah, that'll be definitely exciting. And I see a question in the chat that I'll go ahead and read from John. He writes, I see that there are regulation comparisons for aquatic invasive species. Will this comparison feature be available for other issues?
I think that's a Nicole question.
I was getting myself situated. Those policy comparisons, if they are proving to be helpful, it is something that I think we would like to do more of. You see them deployed in the aquatic invasive species program component piece. We have that within the water distribution piece, and I'm thinking source water, the source water goal within the drinking water issue also has that policy comparison piece. And while I'm pausing there, I'm actually going to answer a question that people didn't ask, but that I had promised Senator Jacques and Jess that I would incorporate. I was able to staff and help out with the Berkholz Institute that was focused on nutrients. And coming out of that, similar to the lead in drinking water, there is a really nice list of policy recommendations to control nutrients in the Great Lakes, dealing both with ag land, but then also with green infrastructure and managing stormwater that dovetails into the next Burkholz Institute on climate resiliency. We're looking at that source water goal within the drinking water issue as potentially being a good place to pull in more nutrients, because we know that there's obviously the relationship between the Lake Erie algae piece and the broader Great Lakes Basin view that we've done with source water protection. And so there isn't only one path to bring in caucus work into blue accounting. I think there's going to be many over the years to come.
Sounds good. Thank you, Nicole. And I'm going to ask my question. Oh, actually, I see someone come in from Lisa, just commenting they would like to see more Canadian data. And actually, this was the question I was going to ask is, do you see difficulties in incorporating data, since this is a binational resource, but it's focused in at the state and provincial level? And those of us who work in this space know that the states and provinces have very different jurisdictions over issues. So would like that question, but I'm also going to continue with Lisa's point. For example, Thunder Bay, Ontario is a major port. We have organizations here who've been working for years on remediating pollution hotspots. And I'm wondering if it's the lack of someone at our end with the responsibility to share data with you. We also have issues with lead pipes, algae blooms, and so on. The port receives Lakers as well as ocean-going vessels. So I think there's a lot there, and thank you for that comment. And then just to add that question up there to both of you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'll take it on, Ceci, with a tip of the hat to the AIS work group, because what we've seen through the AIS work group and Ceci's efforts with that team is that cracking that binational nut can be done under the right circumstances. Unfortunately, in drinking water, we have not quite seen the circumstances to help us figure out the way to present in one format what's happening when the US and Canada are tremendously different in the way that they manage their drinking water systems. So we are looking ahead to have more discussions with colleagues in Ontario. It's also been really challenging. I don't think within the drinking water work, we didn't have anyone from Quebec working with us. We did have some folks on the source water team, but found that it was really challenging for them to feel like they could fit their work within what the state's their framework is and the federal database that we can pull from. It's just that mismatched data problem that we've seen with a lot of things around the Great Lakes. I wish all of this came together. I don't want to say ease, because none of these work groups are easy to facilitate and work through. But there are some particular challenges, I think, when we look at how drinking water is managed across the two nations. And so we're hoping to do more work there. I will say, going to just the structure of the Great Lakes Commission, that the provinces are associate members of the commission. And I wonder sometimes if some of the engagement that we could build comes from them feeling that, it's just not maybe as front and center within their agencies as it is with others. We do see we have a number of associate commissioners from Ontario and Quebec that are very active, and they come to meetings. We just haven't always seen their active participation translate into as active participation through the ministries as maybe we would like to see. So we'd love to see more Canadian data on there as well. I am glad the question was asked. We're working on it, and I welcome any ideas or help on how we can do a better job with that and provide the information to our colleagues in the provinces. Ceci, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think you touched on this, but for the aquatic invasive species issue, we have had really good engagement with both the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry and Quebec's ministry, who just changed their name. And I think it's Environment, Climate Change, Flora, Fauna, and Parks now. And so I very much appreciate that there has been that ongoing discourse with the ministries and that they've been willing to engage on some of these hard topics. And I think that I know that I'm really lucky that I get to work with such wonderful people that are really engaged in this topic and are willing to talk about hard things.
And it sounds like those direct relationships are key then to having those aspects integrated. I did want to ask maybe both of you to talk a bit about how you decide on your metrics for each section. So kind of what do you kind of see as a good metric or something that is perfect for Blue accounting versus something that's going to be difficult to track at all or to visualize on your format?
Yeah, so that again is the metric identification is one of those key roles of our work groups. Because we can start sometimes with a goal that's already in existence, like what we see with Lake Erie algae. And certainly I think, for Ceci, a lot of those AIS goals are ones that are like, yeah, this is what we need to do when it comes to AIS. Drinking water was interesting, right? To try to break down that provision of water from source to tap and what should the goal be. We were breaking ground with that. Those goals are brand new. The metrics, when we think about what would be a good metric within Blue accounting, we go back to an acronym that's used a lot in thinking about metrics, indicators, key performance indicators, and that's SMART, right? We're looking for metrics that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And I think sometimes different people use a different R, but I can't remember what the alternative R is right now. So we want to make sure that we're not just spinning our wheels, looking for something that's impossible, information that just isn't in existence, but to see with the universe that we have available, what's best to put up in this moment in time. The other thing that we're very, very mindful of, and that I hear from our board and commissioners quite a bit, is we do not want Blue accounting to be a burden to our colleagues in the agencies. As Jess mentioned and Ceci touched on, Blue accounting is about relationships even more than it is about data, is what I tend to tell people. It's work groups coming together, feeling that they're in a space where they can learn from and talk with one another and being very candid. And it also takes a lot of courage, which is something that we've seen as Blue accounting has evolved, because when we pull up those tables and you've got an open circle, that's something that if you're one of our work group members and has to take that to their boss and say, hey, I'm working on Blue accounting and we've got an open circle. It takes courage for everyone involved to be able to say, hey, this is the way we move the needle, is by exposing some of those soft spots that need improvement. I hope I answered the question. I gave you more than you asked for, I think.
But it was beautiful.
And I might add, actually, in addition to that, and I think that this is true across the issues as well, our metrics, we really want to make sure, especially in the AIS issue, that whatever it is that we're tracking and that we're communicating has both an actionable piece for managers and for regulators like yourselves. So we want to make sure that the product that we're delivering is going to be of use to everyone who's involved in any sort of level of management of our natural resource issues.
No, thanks for that. And I think we can do one more. So from Representative Troy, Ohio's H2O program is committing a lot of resources to wetland restoration along the Lake Erie shore and watershed. Any efforts or success stories from our other Great Lakes states and provinces?
That is, I'm glad you asked the question, because Ohio is doing something pretty tremendous with their water, not only with Lake Erie, but in water infrastructure and lead. The state investment in H2 Ohio has been truly impressive. There are certainly other funding mechanisms in some of the other states. You can talk with colleagues in Minnesota. I know they've had their penny sales tax in place for quite a while, and it's given them tremendous resources to work with. Specific to the Lake Erie issue, I would point to Michigan. And if you go into the metrics for Lake Erie algae and look at strategies, We have a space where each of the states at this point is putting in some information on how things are going with their domestic action plans that they've created to control phosphorus. And one thing I like to point to, there's Ohio that's really led with their investment in ag land with H2 Ohio Resources and other sources of funding. But Michigan did something really interesting looking at point sources and where there were opportunities for point sources, those municipal wastewater treatment plants, to be able to do more in an efficient way. And so of the jurisdictions that had agreed on an aspirational goal of a 20% reduction by 2020, only Michigan actually got there. And they did it by working with those point sources on the Detroit River.
Thank you, Nicole. And then MPP Mitzi Hunter just put in, do you track actions as part of your metrics?
I think I can answer that question. I'm going to make an assumption on what actions means. So I don't know, Mitzi, if you want to put a clarification in the chat of what specifically that means, but I'm interpreting that as sort of what I've framed as those voluntary or non-regulatory program components. So these are actions that our agencies are taking to address whatever the issue is. So like for recreational boating, that might mean that you are providing decontamination services, even if it's not like regulatory or legislatively required, or that you might have partnerships with local agencies or local like water quality groups to do some of that work. So yes, that is okay, perfect. I got that right. So yeah, so that is something that we've integrated on the AIS side because we recognize that those actions are often just as, if not more important than the regulatory side, because it's what you're doing sometimes maybe in absence or in excess of what your regulations provide.
Sounds good. Well, with that, we are at time. So I want to again echo my thank you to Nicole and Ceci for their excellent presentation and discussion, and as well as all of you for attending this GLLC webinar. I have put Nicole and Ceci's emails in the chat alongside all of the links that from websites and different resources that we discussed today. So be sure to take a look at that before you log out and take a look. But again, thank you. And we hope to see you again soon at our next webinar. So I will finish with a final thank you to Nicole and Ceci. Thank you for an excellent presentation.
Thank you.